Step into the unknown with Serenity Valley Stories. Remember to like and subscribe, if you wish to hear more. And now our feature presentation, The Relic of Fear. I had heard stories of the Bunyip all my life. My elders spoke of it in hushed tones, their voices trembling as they described the creature that lurked in the wetlands, a beast that was more than just a myth. But those stories felt distant, relics of a time when the world was wild and untamed. I never believed them, until the day I came face to face with the monster itself. I'm not telling you this to scare you or to entertain you with some ghost story. I'm telling you because the memory of that night has haunted me for years, and I can't carry it any longer. You wanted to know about the Bunyip? Then you'll get the truth. But be warned, it's not a story for the faint of heart. It was mid-autumn when it happened, just after the first heavy rains of the season. The wetlands had flooded, and the air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves. I was out hunting, trying to bring back something for my family. Times were hard, and the drought had taken its toll on the land. The animals had become scarce, and we were left to fend for ourselves in whatever way we could. I had ventured further than usual, deep into the heart of the marshes. The sky was a dull gray, and the sun struggled to break through the heavy clouds. I remember the stillness of the air, how even the birds seemed to have abandoned the place. There was a heaviness to the land, a sense that something wasn't right. I came across an old waterhole, one that had been nearly dry for years but was now brimming with dark, murky water. I thought I might find some wallabies or kangaroos nearby, hoping they'd be drawn to the water. As I approached the edge, something caught my eye, something moving just beneath the surface. At first, I thought it was a fish, perhaps a large eel, but then it surfaced. The first thing I noticed was its eyes, yellow, slitted, and cold as the stone. They locked onto mine, and for a moment, I was frozen in place, unable to move or even breathe. The creature slowly rose from the water, revealing a body that was covered in dark, matted fur, slick with the mud of the wetlands. It stood on all fours, but its limbs were long and twisted, more like those of a crocodile than any mammal. Its mouth opened wide, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth, and it let out a low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate through the ground beneath me. I was paralyzed by fear, every instinct in my body screaming at me to run, but I couldn't move. The Bunyip stared at me, its eyes glowing with a malevolent intelligence, as if it knew the terror it was instilling in me. It took a step forward, its massive claws sinking into the wet earth, and that was when my body finally obeyed my mind's desperate command. I ran. I ran as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest, my legs burning with the effort. But the Bunyip was faster. I could hear it crashing through the underbrush behind me, its breath hot on my heels. The ground was slick with mud, and more than once I stumbled, barely managing to stay on my feet. I knew that if I fell, it would be the end of me. The trees closed in around me as I fled, their twisted branches clawing at my skin. I could feel the creature gaining on me, its snarls growing louder, more desperate. The terrain was unforgiving, and I could barely see where I was going through the thick fog that had rolled in, but I knew the land well enough to know where I could find some semblance of safety. There was an old cave, not far from where I was, a place where my ancestors had once taken shelter from the storms. I had only been there a handful of times, but I knew it was my only hope. The entrance was narrow, and I prayed that the creature wouldn't be able to squeeze through. I pushed myself harder, my legs screaming in protest as I dashed toward the cave. The Bunyip was almost on top of me now, I could feel the ground tremble beneath its weight, smell the stench of decay that clung to its fur. Just as I reached the mouth of the cave, I felt a sharp pain in my leg, and I went down hard. The creature had swiped at me, its claws tearing through the flesh of my calf. I cried out in pain, but I didn't stop. I dragged myself into the cave, pulling my injured leg behind me as I squeezed through the narrow entrance. The Bunyip lunged after me, but it couldn't fit its massive body into the small opening. It snapped its jaws, the sound echoing in the confined space, and I could see the fury in its eyes as it realized it had lost its prey. I scrambled deeper into the cave, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The pain in my leg was excruciating, and I could feel the warmth of my blood soaking into the ground beneath me. But I was alive, and for that, I was grateful. The bunyip didn't leave right away. It paced outside the cave, growling and snarling, its claws scraping against the rock as it tried to dig its way in. I pressed myself against the far wall, praying that the creature would give up and go away. Hours passed, or maybe it was just minutes, it was hard to tell, but eventually, the bunyip grew tired and slunk back into the wetlands. I stayed in that cave all night, too afraid to move, too afraid to sleep. My leg throbbed with pain, and I could feel the swelling setting in. I knew I had to get out of there, had to find help before the injury became infected, but the thought of leaving the safety of the cave was almost too much to bear. At first light, I forced myself to move. Every step was agony, and I could barely put any weight on my injured leg. I used a broken branch as a crutch, hobbling my way back through the marshes, constantly looking over my shoulder, expecting to see the bunyip lurking in the shadows. The journey back to my village took twice as long as it should have. I was delirious with pain and exhaustion by the time I finally stumbled into the clearing where our hut stood. My family rushed to my side, their faces filled with concern, but I couldn't find the words to explain what had happened. All I could do was collapse into their arms and let the darkness take me. I was bedridden for weeks, my legs swollen and feverish. The village healer did what she could, but the infection had taken hold, and there were days when I was sure I wouldn't survive. My dreams were filled with the bunyip, its eyes haunting me, its growls echoing in my ears. Even now, after all these years, I can still feel its presence, as if it's always just out of sight, watching, waiting. You see, I never went back to that place. I never hunted in those wetlands again. The elders said I was lucky to be alive, that the bunyip had spared me for some reason, but I knew better. It wasn't luck that saved me, it was the cave, the shelter my ancestors had used long before me. I owed my life to them, to the wisdom they had passed down, but that knowledge came with a price. I can't sleep at night, not without the memories clawing their way back into my mind. I can't close my eyes without seeing those yellow slits, those twisted limbs, that mouth full of teeth. The bunyip is real, more real than any story, more real than the ground beneath our feet. And it's still out there, lurking in the marshes, waiting for its next victim. So you wanted to know about the bunyip? Now you know. But be careful what you do with that knowledge. Some things are better left forgotten, buried in the past where they belong. Because once you've seen the bunyip, once you've felt its breath on your neck, you're never the same again. You carry it with you, like a wound that never fully heals. And no matter how far you run, no matter how deep you hide, it will always find you. Just like it found me. The reporter stared at me, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly as he fumbled with his notebook. I could see the fear in his eyes, the doubt, the realization that this wasn't just some tall tale told to spook the gullible. He knew I was telling the truth, or at least he felt the truth of it deep down where it mattered. He thanked me for my time, his voice barely more than a whisper, and promised to share my story with the world. But I didn't care about that. I didn't tell him for fame or recognition. I told him because I had to, because the weight of that memory had become too much to bear alone. As he walked away, I watched him go, wondering if he'd ever truly understand the horror of what I'd seen. And then I turned back to the fire, staring into the flames, trying to burn away the images that haunted me. But the bunyip's eyes still watched from the shadows, and I knew they always would. Thank you for listening to Serenity Valley Stories, and please don't forget to like, subscribe, comment down below, share with your friends, and check out the other stories on the channel.